That brings me to the fourth challenge, which is you guys probably think I'm sort of talking mostly about the past here. Cold War relics, nuclear weapons, things of history. In mid-September, the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle, travel section, had a wonderful full-page story about, quote, atomic tourism. All the interesting historical things you could go see in the United States related to America's nuclear weapons history. That is how we experience this socially and culturally. Yeah, we worry about Kim Jong-un and we worry that Iran might not stop, but basically we don't agonize about this the way we did at the height of the Cold War when we feared for our very survival. And willful ignorance in this area is normal, but not politically practical when we have some big bills coming due. During the Cold War, we spent approximately $1 of every $4 in the defense budget on building nuclear weapons or the delivery systems for them or operating them, and the command and control, and the associated industrial base. Since 1991, we haven't had to spend a penny. The intercontinental ballistic missiles that you read about in the newspapers today in Wyoming, maybe you read about the little drug problem and cheating problem in the silos. Those Minuteman missiles were built in the 1960s and early 1970s. The Congress has said they've got to be there until 2030. The bombers are, of course, B-52s, you know. Your parents weren't alive when they were first built. The newest B-52 bomber was built in 1969, I think, something like that. And the ballistic missile submarines, well, they're newer. They were deployed in the 1980s. Every nuclear weapon in the U.S. arsenal was designed to be replaced within about 20 years. There is no weapon in the arsenal today that was built after 1991. So they're all beyond their supposed shelf life. So we politically have a big question coming. Now, it's not going to cost 1 in 4 defense dollars, but do we Americans want to put money into this problem or not? And if not, are we willing to disarm unilaterally and give up on maintaining a nuclear balance with Russia and China? In the last 5 minutes of my opening remarks, let me talk about the fifth and final challenge, which was one sort of hinted at in the Nuclear Posture Review report, which was where we expressed the commitment to strengthening extended deterrence and assurance of our allies. We began the Obama administration Nuclear Posture Review with a discussion of what lessons could we learn from the experience of the prior administrations in conducting their reviews. And there was one really powerful lesson from the George W. Bush administration, the 2001 NPR. They never talked to anybody. There were a lot of people who felt they were stakeholders in America's nuclear strategy who never got to express an opinion. So we in the Obama administration threw open my door. I mean, I was the stuckee on this one. We said any country that feels it has a stake in the Obama administration's nuclear strategy, come and talk to me. And we conducted over 70 consultations with 35 countries, some of them obviously repeatedly. And what we learned along the way is that of the roughly 40 or so allies that the United States has in 3 regions, Europe, the Middle East, and Northeast Asia, there are about a dozen or so who are pretty darn anxious in this area. The other 3/4 don't worry about nuclear deterrence, don't worry about deterrence generally. You know, Germany's perception is that it sits in the middle of a great big sea of security today. It's surrounded by states at peace. It's not worried about the nuclear thing. It looks at these nuclear weapons that are left in its territory and thinks, these are definitely leftovers of the Cold War. How do we get rid of them? But that's not the view of the countries that joined NATO after the Cold War, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. And then in the second wave, the countries that were not separate Warsaw Pact allies, they were parts of the Soviet Union. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and some states down in Southern Europe. These states are very anxious that deterrence be effective. Imagine you're the neighbor to Ukraine today. You've joined NATO over the last decade. You don't feel secure, and you're sort of wondering how secure NATO's commitment to you might be if, over the last decade, NATO's basically been retiring military capability and sees Putin as a partner. I mean, they're anxious. And in Northeast Asia in particular, the Japanese and South Koreans feel very much under the gun, under the nuclear gun. And they feel the pressure of what I call the Austin, Texas problem. There's an old Cold War concept called decoupling. Here the issue was when the Soviet Union gained the ability to strike the American homeland with ballistic missiles with nuclear weapons. Our European allies began to worry that America might just stay home in a big war in Europe. The risk to America would be too high to engage, and so we would be decoupled. And the big problem for NATO for 30 years was how to ensure the credibility of America's commitment in the light of mutual assured destruction. And the Japanese and South Koreans look at that North Korean photograph and that map of being able to strike Austin, Texas, and say, so, is America going to stay home? Is North Korea going to be able to conduct military provocations against us, start a war potentially of miscalculation or calculation, and America, because it's vulnerable, isn't going to be in the game with us? If that's so, well, we'd better have nuclear weapons of our own. This is a very intense political debate in South Korea today. It's a less intense debate in Japan. Japan has relatively high public political confidence in the U.S. nuclear umbrella. The South Koreans, not so much. The South Korean public opinion shows a steady increase over 20 years to about 70% favoring adoption of an independent nuclear deterrent of their own. The South Koreans are concerned solely about North Korea and the U.S. credibility. The Japanese are also concerned. They're concerned about North Korea, North Korean nuclear blackmail, but they're also concerned about China. Their view of China has very much hardened as China has become more assertive in the maritime environment. Ministries of defense typically produce white papers every few years that describe worldview and what they're doing. And the Japanese Ministry of Defense white paper 3 years ago described the China problem to Japan as one of, quote, creeping international expansionism. The defense white paper of last summer said that the problem presented by China is that it has been successful in using force to change the status quo. We, the United States, have expressed a commitment to strategic stability with China. We haven't defined it. The Chinese say, well, we hope that what it means to you is that you Americans accept mutual vulnerability as the basis of the strategic relationship. We can put you at risk just as you can put us at risk. If you don't accept that, we can't call this a stable thing, and we're going to work very hard to maintain our deterrent. The Japanese say, if you Americans accept that definition of strategic stability with China, what you're telling them is you accept mutual deterrence, that you're choosing to be deterred, and when there's a military crisis with China, you're going to stay home. These are extremely hard, big political choices lurking behind little nuclear strategy questions.